And really, yeah, we've got, in 4403, there are receipts from LightSource, and we've got a resolution on this agenda to transfer those funds so that we can actually expend them for the legal services and financial services that have gone on for Honeysuckle. So with that, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Anyone have a question? Thank you.
Yep. On my next.
You're on a roll. Just keep going.
Hey, there we go. So before you this morning is Resolution 2022-17. This is a transfer of funds within the Fund 4302, which is the New Carlisle Economic Development Area. Due to legal expenses and everything being taken out of this fund to pay through Honeysuckle, the legal line item was well above anything that we wanted to see. But so right now we're just taking funds from the economic development account, which is kind of usually more cash heavy. It's usually property acquisition, it's infrastructure improvements, things that are much more, and we're just transferring money out of that line item to push it up into that consultants and contracts just to clear us for the rest of the year.
What caused the higher costs?
It was a lot of the legal work related to Honeysuckle. We weren't anticipating a lot of the union discussions and things like that, so there were a lot of legal fees that were associated with. So Phil and I and Phil Facenda it was a lot of back and forth trying to figure out the best way forward. So
Thank you.
it was just kept going. So
Probably a 3 month, 2-3 month.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think we were anticipating 2 months. It, unfortunately went a little longer, but I think the project's still moving forward, so that's a good thing. So. With that, happy to answer any questions. Any other questions?
Okay, is there a motion to approve resolution number 2022-17?
I'd make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion, questions? Hearing none?
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Goebel?
Aye.
Mr. Gillian?
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow?
Aye.
Mr. Gripe?
Aye.
And Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
So the next item is Resolution 2022-14. This is a transfer from, again, one account to another. This is related to the LightSource BP project. So in the development agreement, once the development agreement was signed, LightSource was responsible for providing $250,000 to the Redevelopment Commission for payment on bond issuance costs. So a lot of the work that Phil Garrett and Phil Facenda have done are part of that. This had to come into a receipt account that we couldn't expend from, so this resolution is basically moving it from the receipt account to an expenditure account so that we can actually charge the invoices on. So that, happy to answer any questions.
Is there a motion to approve resolution number 2022-14?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Having a motion and a second, is there any further discussion or questions? Hearing none?
Mr. Goebel, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Gillian?
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow?
Aye.
Mr. Gripe?
Aye.
And Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
The next item in your packet is Resolution 2022-18, and that's the termination of Option Agreement B. When we obtained option agreements out in the New Carlisle area, we had 3 option agreements. Option A, which was for Sebasti, Ken and Elaine and Ken Jr. Sebasti property between State Road 2 and Early Road. Option B was for a piece of land that, based on tax key numbers, carried from the south of Early Road to north of Early Road. So we called that Option B, and that held a separate option agreement, same terms, same conditions, things like that. And then Option C was for land owned by the Kaminsky family over at the northwest corner of State Road 2 in Larison. Over the last couple of months, we've done amendments to Option A and Option C, but we purchased the land for Option B. Because we purchased the land for Option B, there's no reason to keep this option open anymore, so we're just asking to terminate it. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Fairly straightforward.
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve resolution number 2022-18?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Goble, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Gillian,
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow,
Aye.
Mr. Greip,
Aye.
and Mr. Jordan.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
The next item in your packet is the Cogent Industrial Partners Monthly Report. That's just filed as part of the agreement that Brian Corrigan would file a monthly report for activities. One thing I would note, back at end of August, Chamber, the county, Cogent, JLL, which is a real estate firm, and Antero Group all participated in a event at the SIOR event that was held out at Notre Dame. Our event was a tour of the IEC, tour of South Bend by air, by helicopter. We got a lot of interest in that. I think we had 35 or 40 people, real estate brokers from outside the area, and even some from inside the area that took that tour. So it was kind of a side benefit. Those that didn't want to golf took this tour. But we've had a lot of interest. One of the parties that took the tour was a member of the British consulate out of Chicago. So her team has a conference set up in November at which Brian and probably myself will go present about the IEC and about this region, but just a way to make additional connections outside this market. So it was a good event, and I'd never ridden a helicopter, and I probably never will again. So, but just wanted to give you that as the update. So, the next item in your packet is Resolution 22-19. At our last 2 Redevelopment Commission meetings ago, we did appraisals on a piece of property at 14402 East Douglas Road. This is a piece of property that sits adjacent to the Canadian National Railroad tracks and Douglas Road, east of Mishawaka city limits, but west of Capitol. This is a property that's been identified as a parcel that needs to be acquired long-term as we look to do improvements and widening of Douglas Road from Capitol to the Mishawaka city limits, either as a standalone project or as a part of a project to put in an overpass or over the train tracks. So this is a property that is currently vacant. Property owners had an interest to sell. We appraised the property. We got the average of the 2 appraisals back at $232,500. We presented those to the property owner just as this is how the numbers came back in. The property owner said, wow, that would be great if we could just, if there was interest to sell or interest to buy, we would have an interest to sell with no additional cost. So I'm presenting this today for your recommendation. Because this property is not on our acquisition list, the Board of Commissioners would have to acquire it. So this resolution would approve funding for the Board of Commissioners to acquire the property as the agent for the county. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
The funds would come out of Capitol Avenue.
They would.
Is this considered contingent or?
It would be inner serving. It would be part of that, yes.
How come how come the commissioners have to purchase it?
So if it's on the acquisition list, the Redevelopment Commission can buy a piece of property. If it's not on the acquisition list, but either within the area or adjacent to the area as part of a project that will benefit the area, then the Board of Commissioners are the agent that can acquire. Now, the difference between the 2 acquisition types, the Redevelopment Commission can acquire for the appraised price, and you can accept, reject, or counter the offer, and so there's a little bit of wiggle room when the Redevelopment Commission buys it. When the Board of Commissioners buy it, it's for value and relocation, but no additional consideration as far as negotiation price. So some would argue that it's better if the Redevelopment Commission buys, because they might have more flexibility.
It just seems awkward.
It
We
is.
provide the funding for another body.
Is there a motion to approve resolution number 2022-19?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Is there any further discussion or questions? Hearing none.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Goble,
Aye.
Mr. Gillian,
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow,
Aye.
Mr. Greip,
Aye.
and Mr. Jordan.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
So the next item on the agenda is an update on the Capitol Avenue Trail project. So over the last year and a half, we've been working on different segments of the Capitol Avenue Trail project. Two specific projects that we felt were at the right time to put out for bid were from Capitol Avenue West on Lincoln Way along Riviera Drive and past, I never remember, Brook Avenue. So that would be south of the river, and then north of the river, McKinley Avenue east from Capitol to just west of Current Road. So, and it would be just on the south side. So there's a picture of both of these projects. We have had these plans and specs done for a while. We had talked to contractors who said, you know, there's just so many projects going on in the region during the heavy part of the summer, wait till the fall to bid. So we have put these out to bid. The bids will come back in on September 27th. One of the concerns, though, that we have had with this project, because largely it's a lot of concrete, and concrete is kind of at a shortage right now, that the prices may come in higher than we want. So we're gonna get the bid numbers in, see where they are relative to the construction estimates, and then make a determination. What we'll do is receive the bids on the 27th, bring them back to the Redevelopment Commission for funding if we choose to be able to go ahead with the project. If the numbers are reasonable, then we'll move ahead. If not, we may have to rebid in the spring and just hope for better numbers, so. But just wanted to give you an update on that project.
Hey, Bill, who's maintaining the trail along Capitol Avenue or the sidewalk?
So right now, it's a combination of the state. So I would say the state does some of it. The county has a couple pieces that are within the county. City of Mishawaka has some sections that it maintains just because it's adjacent to either city property. Property owners maintain some. So one of the things that we're working on from a county strategic standpoint, as part of the comprehensive plan and just as part of some other larger initiatives, is getting a larger strategy or a more global strategy on trail maintenance. We've got the LaSalle Trail, we've got a couple other trail segments in the county that we just don't have a clear plan on how they're maintained. We're trying to get that a little bit more centralized.
It would make sense, and I mean, you guys figure it out, like, the Parks Department needed funding to do that. I don't know if this body could provide that, considering where it is.
Right. So we've looked at that. That may be a strategy. It may be we've had a conversation about a new county department or division that would do just all the mowing. It may be outsourced. So there's a lot of conversation about grass. If we could get rid of some of the properties we own, which is a larger conversation, then, you know, then that helps save some of that too. We've got code enforcement now that needs to have grass mowed. So it's just, it's one of those conversations that, you know, there's just not a bunch of 16-year-old kids that want to mow grass anymore for $1.
The
So,
sidewalk is so nice.
It-
It's just always dirty and it's always
Yeah.
covered with stuff.
yeah, so it's got the potential. It just needs a little bit more focus, so.
All right, I was just curious.
Yep.
So, nothing in Wyatt, nothing.
All you.
So the next two resolutions are related to Project Honeysuckle, so we're kind of right at the tail end of finalizing the economic development area and the TIF setup. I would like to invite Phil Facenda with Barnes and Thornburg up to kind of discuss through these two. In your packet also, just wanted to make sure, Darren Jacobs also with Light Sources here. He provided some correspondence related to pollinator-friendly plantings and some of the things that they're doing, just as a, you know, informational piece to let you know what kind of on their side, what they're moving forward with, so. Phil?
Thank you, Chris. Members of the commission, Phil Facenda from Barnes and Thornburg, located right here in downtown. So the resolution 2215 is a confirmatory resolution. You might recall that back in August, you approved a declaratory resolution which establishes the solar project economic development area, which is the area that will allow, the solar project will be located within that area, and TIF revenues will be generated from that area so long as you approve the confirmatory resolution, which is the last step in the process of adopting a new economic development area and allocation area or TIF area. As I'll address with regard to the other resolution, but as a preview of the other resolution, part of the reason for establishing this area is to allow for the issuance of economic development revenue bonds by the county and the payment of those bonds by a TIF pledge, which is the which is the next resolution. But they're really interrelated. So as I mentioned at the last meeting, after your adoption of the declaratory resolution, the approval by the Area Plan Commission was also had in August, as was the approval by the county commissioners. A public notice was published in the newspaper for today's public hearing, and also provided to all the overlapping taxing units together with a tax impact that was done by Steve Dalton. So the action for today after the public hearing would be your consideration of this confirmatory resolution. And then I'm happy to explain the other resolution if you want. Do you want me to do that now, or do you want me to do that after the public hearing?
Why don't we do public hearing and then you
Okay.
can explain
Okay,
the
okay.
next one.
Okay, very good. I'm, Darren Jacobs from Lightsource is here, Honeysuckle LLC is here to answer any additional questions with regard to the project, but I think you're very familiar with the project. We're talking about a project of 150 megawatt solar farm and a $165 million investment, $50 million of which is the not to exceed amount of the bonds. So happy to answer any questions. Okay, thank you.
Hey, Phil, does the council take action tonight, or is this this is our second action, and then that's
So
it?
the council does take action tonight on the bond ordinance, and then they also take action on the final. So your final step is today, but then the council, because of a quirk of Indiana law and because the council is the legislative body, they take action tonight to approve the establishment of the economic development area.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification, Jason.
There are no other questions, Mr. President. It would be appropriate for a motion to open the public hearing.
I would make that motion.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Mr. Goebel? Aye. Mr. Gillian?
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow?
Aye.
Mr. Gray?
Aye.
And Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Public hearing is now open. Anybody who wishes to speak may do so at this time.
On this resolution, correct?
On this resolution, yes. Any other comments could be made at public comment.
This is on this specific item on the agenda, Deborah. It's a rare thing.
Yes. Okay, so the only, I'll identify myself, Deborah Durrell, 21677 Otten Road, South Bend. As you know, the public is largely in favor of this project, and we understand that while you're taking this step today, there are other aspects of the project that are not completely identified and resolved. And one of those is the pollinator habitat. And I have talked with Darren a couple of times. That is a very long process and is ongoing, but there are gaps in our ordinance that was passed for the pollinator habitat that do not really tighten up what's being done. And so as this agreement is moving toward becoming firmer and more set in stone, we're hoping that these still unresolved issues do not become a problem with having to follow up on them after the fact. Such things as the chemicals, the species, the coverage, invasives, things like that, I think we are still waiting to hear about. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
James Gardner, 1001 North Michigan Street, Lakeville, Indiana. I encourage you guys to pass this resolution today. The concerns with local labor being utilized on this project, we feel very comfortable with Lightsource BP and what they have outlined, what they're going to do to put local people and outreach to schools and potentially impact seniors and students that for the length of this project and ongoing. So once again, I would appreciate if you guys move forward and consider passing this resolution today. Thank you.
Any other comments in person?
Darren Jacobs with Lightsource BP. You know, free to answer any questions as well if you have any. But to Deborah's point, I did want to again point out what we provided today was something that we received from Stantec, who is helping us to put together our seed plan for this process. This Lightsource BP has been sort of a leader in the industry about pollinator-friendly plantings. We've been doing it for years. We were happy to see that St. Joseph County was one of the first counties in Indiana that actually put that restriction in their ordinance. So it was nothing new to us. We were excited to see that and more than happy to work with your planning department if there's open-ended questions or as we go through this process to amend that ordinance that maybe helps, to Deborah's point, to beef it up. But, you know, we have a lot of experience in this process, and you'll see, you know, we've identified plant mixes that will be good for pollinators, but will also be good for grazing, and that we can also keep out those invasive species. That's always a big concern. So with these you know, this type of, and I know we're getting a little into the weeds for a Redevelopment Commission standpoint, but, you know, it all boils down to maintenance and who can take care of it. And we have experience in that. We know how to get this stuff started off right. We're going to work with good partners like Stantec. Innovatus is going to be a good partner with us, the local EPC who's going to be working on this project. So we're going to get the plant started right. We're going to make sure that they're maintained, and we're going to make sure it's a good-looking site for everybody. But we're more than happy to continue that conversation and work with the planning folks to beef it up if we need to in the future. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those as well.
Thank you.
Any additional comments in person? Anyone online? Seeing none, Mr. President, my recommendation would be a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Goebel?
Aye.
Mr. Gillian?
You gave a thumbs up.
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow?
Aye.
Mr. Greib?
Aye.
And Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Motion carries. Now, Mr. President, would be my recommendation for a motion to approve Resolution 2022-15.
Motion to approve?
I would make that motion. First, I just want last opportunity to thank Mr. Jacobs, the members of Labor who worked with him and their willingness to work with him, and then, of course, Chris and Bill. You know, last opportunity probably to say it, so thank you guys for all your work on this. It was awesome. Chris and Phil, yeah. Phil he did sound the most stressed out at times, so Phil, thank you too.
Thank you.
I would move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Goebel?
Aye.
Mr. Gillian?
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow?
Aye.
Mr. Greib?
Aye.
And Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Mr. Facenda, if you'd like to explain the next resolution?
Thank you. Phil Facenda again on the following resolution, 2216. This is the pledge resolution. So with the establishment of the area, the TIF will be generated per the development agreement that was executed by the county and Honeysuckle Solar. There will be distributions of TIF revenue in accordance with that agreement, one of which is would be a pledge of payment towards the debt service on the bonds. And so the Redevelopment Commission is the body to pledge this TIF revenue, as you are the body that the TIF revenue flows to. And the pledge itself is under Indiana law secures the bonds and runs as long as the bonds run. And we are anticipating that the final maturity of the bonds will be in 2049. Don't know if you all will be here and then, but anyway, that is the anticipated final maturity of the bonds. And the resolution also approves a pledge agreement, and all that is a document between the Redevelopment Commission and the county that basically papers the pledge, so that third parties can see that the pledge has been made, and in addition to just the resolution. happy to answer any questions.
State law doesn't require a public hearing on this one then?
No.
okay?
No.
Weird. This is so weird.
No.
Okay.
Okay?
Is there a motion to approve, I guess it's what,
22-16?
22-16?
Correct.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Goble?
Aye.
Mr. Gillian?
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow?
Aye.
Mr. Greip?
Aye.
And Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Bill, did we cover Wyatt Northwest?
We didn't have anything in either of those. Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure if we saw them on the agenda.
Yep.
Okay, is there any additional business that a commission member would like to bring forward? Okay, then it's public comment. Again, anyone is allowed to speak. We simply ask you limit your comments to 3 minutes and provide your name and address. Mr. Caruso, how are you?
Good morning. Dan Caruso, 305 Compton Street, New Carlisle. Again, like to thank Darren Jacobs, Lightsource BP, for the way this was all handled, the way they were open for questions, they were open for change, they were two-way communication. And Chris, I know we realize some cost overruns, but it's money well spent. You get any gray areas cleared up before the project starts, and you don't say, oh, now we're stuck with this because we forgot to ask this question. That the money was well spent. And I say that now in regards to the Ultium electric battery project. This needs to be slow. Everybody seems to be in such a hurry to do this. There are so many questions. I know my friends with labor, they're going to realize about roughly around 2,000 jobs from what we hear. Construction phase. Yeah, for 2 years, that's great. For those guys, it's great. I'm happy for them. It's after the construction phase that I'm concerned with. Where are we going to get 1,700 workers in this area? A majority of them working for between $17 and $22 an hour. You're going to bring people in this area who can't afford to live in the area, so they're going to have to commute in. I don't see, with gas prices, people right now won't work for $22 an hour. And we're going to be stuck with this 2 million square foot building. And a report I heard last week on CBS News is that the largest number of workers ever companies are bringing back jobs from overseas, 350,000. My concern is they're not going to find people to do those jobs here, that they're going to bring in their offshore overseas workers who work for next to nothing, put them to work here, give them a green card, whatever you have to give them, a visa, and say we're employing them here while they're waiting for their citizen application to be considered. And we're going to be stuck with workers who are not going to be having regular withholdings from their payroll paid to the government to support their existence here. We need to ask, these are just simple questions I come up with. There are a lot more questions that need to be asked before we run into this, because once we put a 2 million square foot warehouse on there, we can't farm it anymore, unlike Project Honeysuckle in 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak in the public? Is there anyone online who would like to participate? Being that there doesn't appear to be any more public comment, is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Jordan, before you make that motion, I would just make a note that this is Chris Brown's last meeting. Chris has decided the private sector is probably a little better than the public sector. So Friday is his last day, so I just wanted to thank him for his hard work, and I told him he couldn't leave before Honeysuckle was done, so he's cutting a little close, so.
The allure of working with you wasn't enough.
It was not enough, no.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck, Chris.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Goble, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Gillian?
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow?
Aye.
Mr. Greip?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Antero Group, actually. So the people who did the IEC master plan, I had a project manager position open, so it kind of, a lot of different flexibilities. Yeah, I'll be local for probably 4 to 6 months, and then it just depends. Kind of, my wife